Welcome everybody on this Monday afternoon to our Knitting 102 class. We hope that you are having fun, staying warm. It's gotten a little cold in New York, so Darren is bundling up there in his hat. We'll be learning the purl stitch in this class so that once you're done here, we'll go over that hat pattern and then you can start making yourself nice and cozy as well. I will go ahead and put the pattern and the handout in the chat in case you didn't get that in the email. And if you have any questions over the course of class, just go ahead and type them in the chat there and I can answer directly, or I'll pass them on to Darren so he can demonstrate for us on screen. And now that all of that is said and done, we'll let him take over.
All right, welcome to class. Today we're going to learn how to do the purl stitch. And once you learn how to do the purl stitch, and once we learn how to alternate between the knit and the purl stitch and use them to work together, you can really create an unlimited number of textures or stitch patterns and even different types of fabrics. So the purl stitch really kind of unlocks a lot of opportunities for us and really helps to make our knitting into something really exciting. So even though you can do a lot of stuff with just the knit stitch, once you learn the purl stitch, it's like the whole world's open to you. So let's go ahead and switch to the view of my hands. Let's go ahead and get started. It's a lot to go over today. It's a lot of fun stuff. Okay, so today I'm going to be using wool ease to demonstrate in class. I have the color, let me see what this color's name is. This color is named Air Force. And this is available on michaels.com or on lionbrand.com. Woolies comes, Woolies Thick and Quick comes in a lot of really great colors. So if you search for Woolies Thick and Quick and you start looking at the colors, you might get overwhelmed by all of the great choices. So it's really a great yarn to use. It's fuzzy and just a little fuzzy and soft. So it works up nice. It does have 20% wool, which makes it a little bit warmer. So a quick review, whenever you're buying yarn, you want to make sure you know what size yarn you're buying. This is a size number 6. 6 and 7, 7 being the largest, are on the larger end of yarn. Yarn is categorized 0 through 7, 0 being the smallest, and that's almost the size of like a thick thread or like a kite string. And then once it goes up to 7, it's very, very large, like almost like 2 or 3 of these together. So 7's very large. Today I'm using a size 6, and it gives you a needle recommendation too. So this one is recommending a size 13 needle, which is a US measurement, or 9 millimeters, which is the way the rest of the world measures. The metric system is hard, so we haven't quite learned it here in the United States yet, but maybe someday we will. In the meantime, though, you can either look at US size 13 or 9 millimeter. And then this is indicating what size crochet hook you would use, an N13 or also a 9 millimeter. So if you're going to crochet, you can look at that as well. So this is the yarn I'm using in class, and I am going to be demonstrating on size 13 needles. These are straight needles, which you can knit an item that's flat, like this hat we're going to knit today is going to be knitted flat and then seamed to turn it into a tube or a hat shape, or a scarf. I might also use these circular needles, which is just a different style of needle, but I can also knit a scarf or a hat on these needles and seam it. Or later on, once we've practiced more, we can learn how to knit in the round on these circular needles and create a tube that doesn't need to be seamed. So we can create a tube while we're knitting without seaming later. That's for future learning. So just so you know about some other things that are possible. Today I'm going to start with these straight needles. Any questions before we get started? I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the demonstrations if there are no questions.
We did have a request for a quick view of the knit stitch, but I know we'll be getting to that over the course of class.
Okay, well, that's actually the first thing that I'd like to talk about is I'm going to review the knit stitch and contrast it between the knit and the purl. So what I've done here is I cast on 16 stitches. So if you want to practice along with me, or if maybe you just want to watch, but I cast on 16 stitches and I did knit 2 rows. So I've got 2 rows knitted. And that's just going to give me a base to work into. So if you want to try to work along with me, or maybe you want to just watch, and then you can watch the recording back and work along with the recording, whatever you'd rather do. But so the knit stitch starts, you hold your stitches in your left hand. Your yarn is in the back of your work, so your yarn is away from you. And then you pick up your right hand needle. And so my right hand needle obviously has no stitches in it. And so for the knit stitch, you enter the stitch going front to back. You can make your needles in the shape of an X, which helps to make them work together. You notice I'm holding both of my needles in my left hand, which gives my right hand, it's free to do other things. So I can use my right hand to wrap with. So you enter the stitch, you wrap your yarn, and you want to wrap it counterclockwise. So you're going this direction counterclockwise. And then you're going to bring that loop through, transfer it over. So that is the knit stitch. Enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring that loop through, that yarn through to create a loop, and then transfer it over. Now I've got 2 knit stitches on my needle, okay? So that is the knit stitch. So let's see how the purl stitch is going to be different than that. So the first thing that's different when we're going to make the purl stitch is we have to take our yarn from the back and we're going to bring it to the front. So we're going to bring it in between our needles and we're going to bring it to the front of our work. So when you're doing the purl stitch, you have to bring your yarn, your working yarn has to come to the front. Okay. And now the second difference is, instead of entering the stitch like this, we did with the knit stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of dive into the stitch and enter it from above. So we're going to enter the stitch this direction. And then we're going to make our loop. I'm sorry, we're going to make our X. You're going to wrap your yarn around that needle. And this motion is more like we're pushing it back through. We're pushing that yarn back through to bring up a loop. And then we transfer it over. And that is our purl stitch. So let me go over that again. First thing is you want to enter the stitch. So we're going to dive into the stitch. And then we're going to wrap the yarn. And you can wrap it with your left hand or your right hand. It doesn't make any difference. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise. And then we're going to push that yarn through to bring up a loop and then transfer it over. And that is the purl stitch. So 4 easy steps. Enter the stitch, wrap your yarn, push the yarn through and bring up a loop, transfer it over. Okay. So we're going to keep practicing this and I'll keep demonstrating it. Couple of little learning crutches. You go under the fence, you grab a sheep, back we go, and off we leap. So that's a little learning crutch to help you remember. Or Jack goes in the back door, puts on a scarf, goes back outside, then jumps off. So this is not Emily Dickinson here. These are very simple little rhymes that, they might work as like a memory crutch to help you. So what questions we're going to rest right here for just a second. What questions do we have? Is there a certain spot that you want me to maybe focus on? How are we doing, Claire?
I think we're doing okay. We'll give everybody time to type away here.
I'm never sure if it's coming through on camera clearly. So if you can't quite see what I'm doing or if it's not making sense, please let me know. But that is the purl stitch. I'm going to purl to the end of this row quickly so I can show you how to start the row with a purl stitch, because I did start this row showing the knits. So let me just quickly get to the end and maybe there'll be some questions by the time we get there. So once you've finished your row, so I have no stitches on my left-hand needle, so I'm going to lay that down. All my stitches are now on my right-hand needle. Sometimes it'll be twisted. So what I like to do is just kind of straighten everything out. I give everything a gentle little snug at the bottom to kind of even things up a bit. Turn your work. So I'm putting my work back in my left hand. Now it's not a bad idea to count your stitches to make sure you still have the same number you started with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Did I get one too many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. I have 17. I must have started with 17. I thought I had 16, but that's fine. That's why it's important to count your stitches, because you might have the wrong number of stitches. Sometimes you can add a stitch or lose a stitch by mistake. So at the end of each row, you should count your stitches. So I'm going to start this row off with a purl stitch. So the first thing I have to do is gently bring my yarn to the front. Now you don't want to pull it to the front and kind of scrunch everything up. So just gently bring it to the front. So it's going to be there and available for you. Just bring it to the front. That's the first step. Second step is enter the stitch. You're kind of diving into it from the top. Make the X. Wrap your yarn. And then push it through. Enter the stitch. Now for wrapping counterclockwise, if you look at my knitting needles, if you pretend these are the hands of a clock, so it's 3 o'clock, hold your yarn at 3 o'clock. So you go 3, 2, 1, blast off. So that is helping us get that counterclockwise motion. 3, 2, 1, and then you wrap it. Go behind it and wrap it. And then we push that back through. So enter, wrap, push through, and transfer it over. Okay. Any questions? Usually there are questions by now. How are we doing, Claire?
We're doing oh good. We've got a question that may be what you're going to cover next. Kathy wanted to know, does a knit row followed by a purl row provide better elasticity than just knit stitches, or is it strictly a decorative pattern?
You know, let's just put a pin in that question for a few minutes. I'm gonna go over all the different types of fabric. I don't know if it makes it more, does it make it more elastic? I don't think it does it, Claire? It makes it a different fabric, which has a lot of different characteristics.
Yeah, I think it might stretch, like I think garter stretch might stretch more, garter stitch might stretch more vertically compared to the fabric we're making now, but not really enough difference that you're gonna, pick it for that particular reason.
Yeah. And I have swatches of different types of fabrics. We're going to look at the different properties and some of the benefits and drawbacks of each one. Okay. And that's coming up in just a few minutes. So there we go. We've finished our row again. My stitches I work them all from the left to the right. I'm going to make sure everything looks nice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I have 17 stitches, even though I wanted 16, but I'm going to go with 17 for now. And that's what I'm doing. So any questions? Are we making purl stitches successfully, or are we getting hung up at a certain spot? I don't want to move too fast. I want to give everyone time for questions.
Here's a good question. Yasmin's last stitch is very loose. How can they tighten them?
All right, so that is kind of like the age-old question in knitting. That's the question that everybody kind of comes up with. The problem is that knit stitches or purl stitches are only truly happy and only truly balanced well if there is a stitch on each side of them and a stitch under them and a stitch above them. And if they have stitches all around them, what that does is that holds the tension nice and even, because they have stitches all around them. Your last stitch, like this one, or even this one on this side, it only has a stitch below it and it only has a stitch beside it. So it has two ends which are kind of unsupervised. And if your knit stitches are left unsupervised, they kind of go crazy. They really want to act up. So what will happen is by the time you work your next stitch, whether you're knitting or purling, once you've put that stitch above that loose stitch, it kind of holds the tension a little bit better. So you can see now that stitch there, it's already tightened up because I've got that stitch above it. And then for your final row, you'll do your bind off, and that will usually balance out those stitches. So how do you feel about that, Claire? What do you do?
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, your edge stitch, like you said, it's always going to be a little bit looser because it doesn't have a buddy to hang on to. And you don't really want to, strangle that stitch too tightly because then it's going to be different in the opposite direction from the rest of that row.
Yeah. Sometimes I might pull them just slightly, maybe just a little more snug, but not very much. If you really don't want to, or else it'll be too tight and that'll be other problems. So any other questions? We ready to move on then? Are we?
I think we're motoring right along here.
Okay, so let's see what the next thing will be. All right, so make sure, one thing I do want to go over again, just to re-emphasize it, make sure that you have to enter the stitch the right direction, and then you have to wrap your yarn counterclockwise, or else you'll end up with twisted stitches. And that's not the end of the world, but later on, when you start doing more complicated knitting patterns, if your stitches are twisted, then that will cause you problems. So make sure you're entering the stitch this direction, and you're wrapping your yarn counterclockwise. So 3, 2, 1, blast off, and then go under that needle and wrap it that direction. Because you don't want to get in the habit of having twisted stitches. When I taught myself how to knit, and I was twisting my stitches and wrapping them the wrong direction, and I didn't know any better. And I was making beautiful things, and I was very happy. And then somebody, explained to me why it's better to do it the correct way. And it took me a long time to like unlearn that bad habit. So make sure you're trying to do it the correct way right from the start, and then that will help. So once you learn how to do the knit stitch and the purl stitch, the next thing you need to learn is, how do I tell the difference between a knit and a purl? And I don't know if you've noticed, well, I don't know if you're working along with me, but I've been doing purl rows here, and these purl stitches seem to look a lot like these knit stitches that we did last week. So we're kind of ending up with the same kind of garter stitch. And what is going on is there's a secret about the knit stitch. So I always like to say it's the secret life of a knit stitch. And the secret is that the knit stitch and the purl stitch are the exact same stitch. So that is the secret. So now that the secret's out, we need to talk about, like, why do we need to learn the knit stitch and the purl stitch if they're the same stitch? So they're the exact same stitch, except for one is the front and one is the back. So they look very different from the front and the back. So when I create all knit stitches, I made this swatch by knitting every stitch on every row, and I created this nice garter stitch swatch. And it's the same on both sides. If I were to make this swatch purling every stitch and purling every row, it would come out looking exactly the same, because remember, we're working with basically the same stitch. So the reason we want to learn the knit and the purl is because once we combine the stitches and start working with them and interchanging them, we can make different fabrics. So if you only know how to do the knit stitch, then you can make garter stitch. But once you learn how to do the purl stitch, you can make other fabrics. And this fabric is called stockinette stitch. And this is probably what you think of when you think of knitted fabric. So most of your sweaters, even t-shirts, are made out of stockinette stitch, which is probably the most common knitted stitch. And this is a nice fabric for many reasons, but for teaching it's especially nice because we can really talk about what the knit stitch and what the purl stitch look like, all right? So I'm going to isolate one stitch and we're going to look at how it looks. So I put my darning needle underneath one stitch. And you can see if I kind of help it a little bit at the bottom, that stitch is shaped like a V. So it has two different sides that kind of come down together and it fits in that nice V. It makes that nice V shape. So there and there. And that is what identifies it as a knit stitch. So right there is a knit stitch. And when you get a whole lot of knit stitches in a field together, what it creates is this fabric stockinette stitch, and it's a nice smooth, it's very smooth. They're very pretty the way they all kind of line up and fit together. It's a very nice fabric. Now on the back, we have purl stitches. Now, the first thing you notice about purl stitches is that they're not shaped like V's. So if we find V stitches, it's kind of like, okay, they're V's, so we know they're knits. And if we look on this side, we don't see any V's, so they must be purls. Also, if you look at the purl stitches, you can see they kind of create these little bumps and they create these rows of ridges. And so purls are going to be referred to, you're going to hear them referred to as purl bumps or purl ridges. And it almost makes like a wavy line. So I don't know if you can quite see. If you follow it across, it kind of looks like a wavy line. And it almost looks like kind of like C shapes that are kind of fitting in together like this, like kind of hooking together. So that's what purls look like. And that's what knits look like. Now, one of the most important times you need to be able to identify a knit or a purl is when you're working on your needles. So let me just get a couple of stitches done here. And then we're going to look and see the difference between knits and purls on your needle. Because when you come to a stitch, that's when it's very important to know what to do. So if you look right here on my needle, here, isolate this stitch right here, and that is a knit stitch because it looks like a V. You can see how it kind of looks like that V shape. Knit stitches also, they hang below the needle. So I've got my loop coming over my needle. It goes into my knit stitch, and the knit stitch it's hanging below the needle. It's not even really, it's kind of touching it, but not really, touching it so much. Now, if we look at the back of that same stitch, now the back of that stitch is a purl stitch, because remember, it's the same stitch, but they're different on the front and the back. So when we look at that stitch from the back, you can see it's bumped up tight against the needle. So it's not hanging down below the needle. It's bumped up tight against the needle. And you can see this kind of bump. It kind of looks like a bump or like a bead. And that is how you tell if it's a purl. So if you see it bumped up tight against the needle, and it's making this kind of bump or a bead or purl, then you know it's a purl stitch. And if you see it shaped like a V, so in knitting classes and in knitting videos and stuff, you're going to hear a lot about the V shape and the bumps and the ridges. So get used to hearing that. And then the knit stitch hangs below the needle and it looks like a V. Any questions about how to tell the difference? Or is it showing up on camera right? Are you able to see? What questions do we have? Because it's very important that you get comfortable with that as you're practicing. So that is right there, a knit stitch. That is the knit. No questions? I'm surprised there are no questions.
We'll give everybody another minute or two to type, but I think that was a good explanation.
Okay, so when I first learned to knit, I didn't understand that, and I was very confused for a long time about why my stitches looked the way they looked, because when I was making purl stitches, I knew they looked different than when I was making knit stitches, but I don't know, it was a complicated thing for me, so I couldn't figure it out. So I just want to make sure everybody else like knows exactly how to tell the difference. So just remember, they look different on the front and the back. You look different from the front and the back. So the knit stitch wants to be like everybody else. So it just looks different from the front and the back.
We do have a question on the stockinette stitch fabric. And I don't know if you want to cover this now or wait till later. Someone wants to know, how do you prevent your work from curling?
All right, well, we'll get into that in just a minute. I do want to demonstrate how to make the stockinette stitch fabric first, and then we're going to look at both of the fabrics and talk about them. So to make garter stitch, you knit every stitch on every row, or you could purl every stitch on every row. And for stockinette stitch, what you're going to do is you're going to knit all of your stitches on one side. So I'm quickly trying to knit to the end of this row. So you knit all of your stitches on one side. Finished my row. And then when you turn your work over, instead of continuing with knitting, now I'm going to purl. So with stockinette stitch, you put all of your knits on one side and you put all of your purls on the other side. So let me quickly do a couple of. So now I'm purling. All of my purls are on one side and all of my knits are on the other side. And you can see it's already creating a different kind of fabric. So it's creating that stockinette stitch fabric. All of my purl ridges are on the back and all of my nice V stitches are on the front, which makes it, that's what makes it stockinette stitch. So I'm not going to knit all the way across. I'm going to turn and go back, which is not something we do with beginners, but I just want to, in the effort to save time, I'm just going to, because I want to get a couple of rows in so you can see how it looks. And that's how you do stockinette stitch. You put all of your knits on one side and all of your purls on the other side. And that's what's giving me this new look to this new fabric. And you can see right here where I turned and went back. That's a big mistake if you're not doing it on purpose, so be careful for that. But just for the sake of saving time, that's what I did. And I created this different kind of fabric. So now let's talk about the difference between the two different types of fabric and some things about them. So this is the garter stitch. Garter stitch lays flat. It's very nice because it lays flat. It's thick, so it's kind of spongy and it's soft. It makes a great baby blanket or scarf. It has these ridges and then these valleys. It's like a mountain and a valley, which the purl ridges create the mountains, and then the knit stitches kind of create those low valleys. And that creates kind of like a very nice insulation. So it's because it's thick and it has these kind of little air pockets. It's very insulating. It's very soft. It's warm. It lays flat. It's reversible, the front and the back. So if you make a scarf out of it, you tie up your scarf pretty, the front and the back look the same. If you're having a baby blanket and you wrap the baby up in the blanket and you have pictures taken, the front and the back blanket look the same. They look very nice. So that's the main benefit of garter stitch. Because it is so thick and spongy, if you make a sweater out of it, or if you make a skirt out of it, it doesn't have a great drape. It's a little stiffer. Because it's thick, it also adds a lot of bulk. So it's not necessarily the most flattering fabric. Let's look at our knits and our purls. So here I'm seeing my purl ridges very clear. I'm seeing kind of this wavy line. I'm seeing this raised bump. That's my purls. So if I turn it over, wait a minute, I'm just still seeing purl stitches. So now where are my knit stitches hiding? So the knit stitches are hiding in between those ridges. So the thing about stockinette, or I'm sorry, garter stitch, it kind of compresses this way. So it kind of shrinks a little bit and gets a little bit squat. But if you pull it apart, you can see that we have our knit stitches. The knit stitch is right there. So the knit stitch is just kind of hiding in between the purls. And if you want to count the rows with this, usually you count these ridges as, just go ahead and count them as 2. So like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So actually I skipped one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 18, 16. I'm sorry, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So there we go. And that's how you count them, because you're counting the purl ridge and the knit stitch kind of at the same time. Or you can count them like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do it either way. Now, stockinette stitch, one thing about stockinette stitch, it's always rolls up into a tube. It can either roll this way, sometimes, and it can even roll this way. So it just always wants to roll. It wants to kind of twist up like that. And the reason being is because the knit stitch is a little bit tighter than the purl stitch. And because that tension is a little bit off, one's pulling one way and the other one's going right along with it. So it's always going to curl up like this. And the one way, there's really no way to stop it. So you can pin it out and you can block it and you can steam it. And it's going to look really nice and it might lay flat for a little bit, but then it's going to revert back to being curly. So it's like if you have curly hair and you straighten your hair, it looks perfectly straight, but by the end of the day, it's probably starting to curl up again. So it's the exact same principle as that. There's really no way to prevent it. You can staple it down. You can staple it to a wall or something, but then when you take the staples out, it's going to curl up again. The reason we usually have ribbing on knitted items is because the ribbing lays flat. And we put ribbing along the edge of our stockinette stitch because it keeps the stockinette stitch from curling. So if you have stockinette stitch, if you think about your sweaters and your hats and like your gloves, you're going to notice that most of the time you do have ribbing on the edges of those, and that's what keeps it from curling. Another thing you can do, if you're working with thinner yarn, you can fold it over and sew it, and that will keep it from curling. You can fold it over and sew it, or you can put garter stitch along the bottom edge or the side, and that will keep it from curling that direction. And then, of course, if you sew it, then it's not going to curl because it's sewn together. So do not make a stockinette stitch scarf, because if everyone wants to make a stockinette stitch scarf, and that's usually what beginners do, is they make a scarf out of stockinette stitch because stockinette stitch is so pretty. And by the time they're finished, it's rolling up into a tube. And then they're like, what's wrong? Something's wrong with this yarn because it's rolling up. Well, you know, that's just the nature of stockinette stitch. So any questions about did I answer the questions you guys had about the fabrics and different? Questions? So interesting thing about these two swatches is they're the same number of stitches and same number of rows. So if you stretch this out, it would be the same. So stockinette stitch tends to be a little bit taller. And then because it rolls, if you kind of pin this out, it'll be just as wide. So I made these just so you can see the difference, how one kind of tends to shrink a little bit vertically and one rolls in more sideways. So stockinette stitch and garter stitch, both very good, but kind of for different reasons and different purposes. What do you think, Claire? Which one do you like best?
It depends on what I'm making, really. For like shawls and scarves and things, I like garter stitch because it's so nice and soft and squishy, and you don't have to worry about it rolling or curling or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it really just depends on what you're making, and it depends on the purpose of your project. One thing when I was first learning to knit, I would put a safety pin on one side of my stockinette stitch, and that way I always knew which was the knit side, just in case I got mixed up. When you're learning, sometimes things aren't quite so clear, or you might be watching TV and lose track of where you are. So I would put a safety pin, and then as I was knitting, if I didn't see the pin, I knew for sure I was on the purl side. And if I saw the pin, then I knew for sure I was on the knit side. And that was just a little thing that helped me kind of get through kind of like that learning struggle. Sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle learning new things. All right. What questions do we have? Any questions at all?
We've had a couple that I've answered in the chat, but I'll say them now so everybody can hear. Let's see. Sarah had a good question. For stockinette, do we use the same cast on as last week?
Yes, you can use the same cast on for stockinette stitch. Really, the only reason you would change the cast on, sometimes different projects want you to use different cast ons for different reasons. Like a provisional cast on would be one that you would take out later for seaming, or you might want to use a really stretchy cast on for different reasons. But if you're following a pattern, the pattern will tell you which cast on to use. There are so many great cast-ons, and last week we learned the knitted-on cast-on, which is going to be good for all of our beginning projects. But I do encourage you to research and find some new cast-ons. You can research the long tail cast-on. That's one that I use almost all the time. So that's kind of like for independent learning. So there's the long tail cast-on or the knitted-on cast-on. What's your favorite cast-on, Claire?
I pretty much use the long tail cast on for everything. It's
Yeah,
my favorite.
I almost always do too.
And then Lana had a question. Does it matter which you begin with? I think they're talking about stockinette stitch. Does it matter if you start with a knit row or a purl row?
Usually I always start with a knit row, but it's not gonna look any different really. It's the pattern will usually tell you to cast on like so many stitches and then work stockinette stitch until it's like 10 inches or 20 inches or whatever. Do you start with a purl row, Claire, or why would you do that? I don't know. Does it matter? I feel like it kind of should matter, but maybe it doesn't.
I know like with the long tail cast on, because that is a cast on that sort of like makes a row of knitting. And so if you want a very smooth bottom edge without that bump, then you would want to purl your first row. Usually I don't think it matters that much, or if you're going right into ribbing, then you'll be alternating the stitches anyway or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, usually the pattern is going to tell you, are you starting with a right side row, aka knit, or a wrong side row,
Oh.
aka purl?
Yeah, usually that if it matters, I think the pattern will usually tell you that. But I don't know, I always start with the knit row first. I'm not sure why, but yeah, that's just kind of the way I always do it. I mean, I think the short answer is no, it doesn't matter, but like Claire said, in some instances it might be slightly better to start with the knit stitch, but probably not a huge crisis either way. Anything else? That's a good question though.
That is it for now.
That's it for now. All right, so let's look and see how we make ribbing. So we do want to learn how to make ribbing. And once you learn how to alternate, what we were doing, we did all knits on one side and all purls on the other side. So we were working knits and purls, but keeping them separate, basically. All knits on one side, all purls on the other side, very, very orderly, and made stockinette stitch. So now what we want to do is we want to learn to alternate between knits and purls. And that's called ribbing. And well, what we're going to do now is called ribbing. So once you learn to alternate between knits and purls, you can do all kinds of fun textures. You can do seed stitch, moss stitch, linen stitch. There's all kinds of different types of fabrics you can make. So let's start with ribbing. So I'm going to do knit 2, just like normal knit stitches, knit 2, and then to do a purl stitch, you have to come to a full stop. You have to open your needles. You have to bring your yarn from the back to the front, but it has to come in between your needles. It has to come in between. And then now that my yarn is in the right position, I can do as many purl stitches as I want. So I'm going to do 2 purl stitches. 1, 2. Finish the stitch, come to a full stop, open your needles, bring your yarn in between your needles. Now it's in the front. It's in the correct position for knitting. So I'm going to knit 2. Full stop, open the needles, bring it between, and now purl. And so usually when I'm knitting, what it looks like is this. See, you don't have to be so dramatic about it every time. You know, I do tend to run a little on the dramatic side, so. And then keep going, and I'm going to finish the row. Okay, so I finished my row. I did 2 purls. I'm going to turn my work over. Now I finished my row with 2 purls, right? I finished with 2. I know they're purls because I just made them. I know they're purls. Now, when I turn my work over, what happens? Just like magic, they turn into knits, right? Because now I'm on the other side of their stitches. On this side, they're purls. On this side, they're knits. So now I'm going to knit, and I'm going to knit all of the knits, and I'm going to purl all of the purls. So for ribbing, and you can do knit 1, purl 1, knit 2, purl 2, knit 3, any combination. But what you want to do is make sure you're stacking your knits on top of knits and your purls on top of purls. So I'm doing 2 knits here. Full stop, open my needles, bring it through, and I'm going to do 2 purls. And then if you put this down and you go eat dinner and watch a movie, and then you come back the next morning, maybe you don't know what you were doing. You know, maybe you're not sure. So let's look at it. What was I doing? All right, let's look at this. Okay, so this right here looks like a V shape. So that must be a knit, right? And this looks like a V shape right next to it. And then these are, see how they're bumped up tight against the needle? See how they look very different than this? I don't know if it's shown up on camera or not. So you can see these bumps right here, they're raised. And then these knit stitches are laying more flat. So you want to learn to read, it's called reading your knitting. And right now you want to learn how to read knits and you want to learn how to read purls. Now later on, you'll learn some other things that you'll need to learn how to identify. But right now, you want to learn how to read knits and purls. So now I know, okay, so I'm going to do 2 knits. And then I'm going to do 2 purls. And I'm going to finish my work in that fashion. All right. I'm going to demonstrate this again, but what questions do we have in the meantime?
What happens if you forget to switch your yarn between the stitches and you do it, say, like over or under the needle?
Perfect. I was actually going to demonstrate that next. So let's look here and see where we're going to start. So these are our knit stitches. So they're 2 knit stitches. So I'm going to start with my knits. So I'm going to do 2 knits. And then I'm going to bring my yarn this way. Let's, whoopsie, that's a mistake, but let's go with it. I'm going to do, and then, so what happened there? So I did 2 knits and 2 purls. So I should only have 4 stitches, but what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait a minute, let's do it again so you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 stitches. So how did I get an extra stitch? That's a problem. That doesn't look right. Like, I don't have any other big holes, so that maybe that's a clue that that's a problem. So I'm going to take these stitches out. And let's look exactly what I did wrong, okay? So instead of bringing my yarn through, I brought it this way. And what happened, it got wrapped around, I wrapped it around my needle. And anytime you wrap yarn around your needle, it has the opportunity to become a stitch. So if you're not being careful, you can create a new stitch by mistake. Now, the thing about this stitch is, though, it's not connected to anything underneath of it. So when I go to do that next stitch, it's creating a hole. Now, what I just made, it's called a yarn over, and it is an actual stitch that you'll be using later on in different projects. But if you make one by mistake, then you're not going to be very happy about it. So a lot of the mistakes that you're going to make while you're learning are actually more advanced stitches that you'll be able to use later on. But when you make them by mistake, they're not so much fun. So, and if you do that and you add a stitch by mistake, then when I do knit two, purl two, knit two, purl two, it's not going to be on track because I've got an extra stitch and it's going to throw everything off. So you want to make sure you're bringing your yarn between, enter the stitch, make my purls. Now here's a mistake. Here's another, sometimes people will make the mistake. They'll go ahead and, okay, so now I'm going to do my knit stitch, but my yarn's in the wrong place. So let me put my yarn in the front to do my knit stitch. But what happened was, look, it got wrapped. I didn't mean to wrap it around my needle. I just put it in the front. But because I already entered the stitch, it ended up getting wrapped around the needle. And so it's going to make that big hole and add another stitch. So I just finished my purls. So I'm going to make my knit stitch. Whoop. Oh, my yarn's in the wrong place. You have to back out of that stitch, open your needles, and then go through. And then you'll be ready. So if you do it incorrectly, you do have the opportunity to make a mistake that's going to actually be a problem for you. So make sure you're not doing it incorrectly. And that's why I always recommend to count your stitches at the end of each row as you're practicing to make sure that you're not making a mistake like that. So when you're practicing these stitches, it's nice to only cast on like 20 or 16 or 24. You want to cast on, if you're practicing knit two, purl two ribbing, you do want to cast on stitches that are divisible by 4 so that you can do your knit two, purl two, and then I've finished my repeat. And I'm going to do knit two, purl two, and I finished my repeat. So you're repeating a group of stitches that are 4. You're repeating the same group of 4 stitches over and over. So if you cast on 21 stitches, it's not going to work for your stitch repeat. So as you're practicing, it's nice to have, the right number. And if you're doing knit 1, purl 1, any even number will do because you want to make sure you have a number that's divisible by 2 as you're practicing. Now, when you're working on a pattern later on, that might not be the case, but for practice, we want things to be as easy as possible. Does any of that make sense, or some of it, or maybe even all of it made sense? What do you think, Claire?
I think that was a good explanation and a good way to show the things that could go wrong so you can recognize them quickly and fix them before it causes too much trouble.
Yeah, and it does kind of cause trouble, so you do want to be careful. All right, any other questions, anything at all?
I'll give you a time check that we've got about 15 minutes left in class.
Okay, so let me just check my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. So just remember, with ribbing, you can do any kind of combination of, sometimes ribbing isn't like balanced perfectly. Sometimes you might have like knit 2, purl 3, or knit 5, purl 2 or something, but usually it's pretty balanced because if the stitches are balanced nice and evenly, then that's what helps it to lay flat. if you had like a great big, like say you had like 10 knit stitches and then 10 purl stitches, each group of stitches would kind of curl the other direction. So usually there's not a lot of knit stitches or purl stitches, and usually they're pretty balanced. So that's one, but they can be in any combination really. It's an art form, so you can kind of make it however you want.
We've got a good question here from Yasmin. When does the ribbon start cinching in, like pulling in?
It really probably does right from the start, but you might not notice it until you get like maybe a ½ inch to 1 inch of it. What do you think, Claire? I mean, it's gonna kind of start right away, but depending on what other fabric is around it, sometimes that kind of holds it in place until you get enough. Well, like 1 inch, do you
Yeah.
think, ½ inch?
I would probably say more like 2 or 3 inches
Maybe
for
2
it
or
to
3
really
inches,
start
yeah,
visibly, because
before
the
you,
stitches on your needle are going to be sort of spread apart by the needle, so they're not going to
yes.
be able to squish back in.
Yeah, so, but like I have garter stitch here, and then I have some stockinette stitch. So if I start my ribbing, these stitches are going to kind of hold their shape. And then the ribbing won't be able to start pulling in until you get enough of it above that, and then those stitches will start kind of coming in. So one thing I do want to mention, and this is for future learning, I'm not going to demonstrate this, but I want you to know that it is something I like people to do research and discover things. There's a purl called the Norwegian purl. It's like from Norway, so it's Norwegian, and it's a complete different way of doing a purl than what we did today. So just as an example, there's always something more to learn, and once you learn how to do something, you can always learn a new way to do it. So there's always new and exciting things to learn with knitting. So if you want to just kind of do a YouTube search, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to do. So we did our fabrics. I think we're ready to do the pattern, Claire. Any other questions or anything I missed before we go to the pattern?
We do have one question here, and this might be a little more advanced than we want to get into in this particular class. But because you demonstrated a little bit how to like undo a few stitches. Can you
I
show
was
that again
wondering
real
if anyone
quickly?
caught that. What was the question though?
Can you show again how to undo just a couple stitches if you need to go back like 3 or 4?
I will quickly, but yeah, we don't want to get bogged down into that. So the one thing about knitting is when I finished knitting, I knitted all of my stitches from my left-hand needle to the right. So if you're going to unknit, you want to unknit them. You want to hold your work the same way you held it when you knitted it. So I knitted my work like this. And if I'm going to unknit, you want to unknit it back the same direction. So the temptation is to turn it, but when we're unknitting, we're doing it kind of in reverse. And so you just go, and this is probably too advanced, so you don't want to get confused by this. You just go to the stitch right underneath, and you just kind of unknit them one at a time. And if you want to get an in-depth review on how to do this, we do teach a class called Knitting 104, which is fixing mistakes. And I teach how to unknit and fix many other mistakes. We've taught that class in the past. We don't have it scheduled now, but if you go to YouTube and search Knitting 104 michaels.com, it will bring up the YouTube class that we've taught in the past. And then you can watch that and get a full demonstration of unknitting and fixing other mistakes. But if you're a new knitter, don't get too bogged down in that yet, because it might be too advanced. So just don't, just be a little careful, but it's always important to learn new things. So go ahead and watch that. All right. Does that kind of answer that a little bit without getting into it?
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Yeah, because I don't want to, that's a whole class, so we can't like really get into it. That's the problem with that. All right, so the hat is so this hat here, which I'm going to talk about. And then there's this one. You can see they're just a little different, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences. That's for this pattern. And it is a free knitting pattern by Lion Brand, and you can print this from Lion Brand's webpage. lionbrand.com. It's called the Heartland Thick and Quick Knit Level 2 Hat. It's very easy. Very nice for beginners. Now, just quickly about reading a pattern, it gives us the beginning level 1, which is perfect for us. One size should fit almost most people because hats are very stretchy. So unless it's not going to fit a child or it's not going to fit somebody with a very large head. But for practicing, this is a good hat that'll fit most people. The finished circumference is about 18 inches, and hats do stretch. So if you're a little looser or a little bit tighter, that's probably fine. What we need here, it's calling for Lion Brand Heartland Thick and Quick yarn. The original hat was made in color redwood, 1 ball. Now, I like this pattern for this class because I'm not using this yarn, and I want to demonstrate to you that you don't have to do everything that you're told. So I don't like to do everything I'm told, so I'm always trying to do something different. So I didn't use the correct yarn, but I did I'm using Wool Ease Thick and Quick. Now, I know a lot about Heartland Thick and Quick, and I know it's a number 5 yarn, but it's a very thick number 5 yarn, and it's almost the same size as a number 6. So I know it's okay to substitute it for Wool Ease Thick and Quick. So if you have a pattern that's calling for a certain yarn and you can't get that yarn or you don't have that yarn, if you look up what kind of yarn that is and get the size of yarn, you can Google it, then you can make decisions about what yarn you're going to change it to. And you want to make sure you're changing it to a yarn that's very, very similar. Like you wouldn't want to use sock yarn for this. Like you wouldn't want to make this with a thin yarn because you're just going to have all kinds of problems. So as long as the yarn is very similar and you want to make sure you have the right yardage, which if you use Wool Ease Thick and Quick, you will. You could also use Hometown Bonus Bundle, and that's what I made this one out of. And you have enough maybe to make 2 or 3 hats out of Hometown Bonus Bundle because it is it's a bonus bundle, so there's lots of yarn on it. And that one also comes in a lot of great colors. So lots of good choices, and you do not have to do what you're told. Lion Brand knitting needle size 11, and then you need large-eyed blunt needles for weaving in your ends and seaming. Okay, now gauge. All gauge means is that if my stitches are the same size as the designer stitches, then my hat will be the same size as the designer's hat. Now, if my stitches are too tight, if my stitches are small and much tighter, then my hat will be small and much tighter. And if my stitches are large and much looser, then my hat will be large and much looser. But for new knitters and for beginning projects, you don't need to worry so much about that. The hat will probably turn out fine just by, you don't really have to do a gauge swatch or anything. So we're not really going to worry about that too much for beginning projects. But that is something later on. If you're making sweaters, you do want to make sure the sweater actually fits somebody. So, gauge does become important later on. So the hat is worked in one piece and then seamed. So that's just a little bit about how we're making it, how it's kind of shaping up. So for the hat, we're going to cast on 50 stitches. And it doesn't tell us how to cast on. So you can use the long tail cast on, you can use the knitted on cast on, you can use whatever cast on you want. It doesn't tell us how, so whatever you want. Row number 1. And the first thing you want to notice is there is an asterisk there. So whenever there's an asterisk or really any punctuation, it could mean something that you have to pay attention to. So notice that right away. We're going to knit 2 and then purl 2. And then we're going to repeat from the asterisk across to the last 2 stitches. And the last 2 stitches are going to be knit 2. Okay, so we're going to do knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. Alternating between, like I showed you, bringing your yarn in between the needles. And then the last 2 stitches, we're going to end with knit 2. Now the next row, again, starting with the asterisk, we're going to purl 2 and knit 2. So kind of the opposite. Repeat from the asterisk, and at the last 2 stitches, we're going to purl 2. So what we're doing here is we're working ribbing. And what do we know about ribbing? Ribbing means that we're knitting all of our knit stitches and we're purling all of our purl stitches. So we're stacking knit stitches on top of knit stitches, and we're stacking purl stitches on top of purl stitches to make long columns. So as you're working this ribbing, I don't want you just working it, knit two, purl two, knit two, purl two. I want you looking at your stitches, deciding, are these knits or are these purls, and make sure that you're knitting and purling in the proper place, because it's easy to get off track. So double check and kind of watch what you're doing so you don't get off track. Look and decide, are these purls or are these knits? And then make the right decision on what you're supposed to do. Before you know it, you'll be an expert at it, though it really comes fast. You're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 until the piece measures about 2 inches from the beginning. Now, what that means is you're going to measure it from the cast-on edge, from the very, very edge. So you want to measure it right from the edge, and then you can see my ribbing here is 2 inches. But you line it up, you're kind of including the cast-on edge with it, okay? Now, in the next section, you'll be knitting 1 row and then purling 1 row to make stockinette stitch. Well, that's not so hard. After you've had a chance to practice that, you'll be able to do that real easy, but you do need to practice a little maybe. So the next row you're going to knit, and then the next row you're going to purl. And so here's a chance, like when you knit that first row, maybe you want to put a safety pin on that side. So okay, every time I see the safety pin, I know I'm supposed to be on the knit side, so I should be knitting. So it might help you keep track. You're going to repeat the last 2 rows until the piece measures about 9 inches from the beginning. So now from the beginning, you're going to measure it from the very edge of the cast on. So it's from the beginning, so you're measuring the entire hat. You're going to cut the yarn, leaving a long tail. Leave it maybe 20 inches, really long tail, because we're going to use that for seaming, so don't skimp on that. Thread the yarn tail onto a blunt needle, beginning with the last stitch on the knitting needle. Draw the blunt needle through the remaining stitches and pull stitches together fast enough. Okay, that sounds very confusing, so let's look at it. Get this out of the way. All right, so what is going on here? So I've knitted, this is what you're going to end up with when you're finished. So I did my cast on, I did my ribbing for 2 inches, I knitted my stockinette stitch. It's a little more than 9 inches, but that's fine. And so I've cut my yarn and I've left a very long tail. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this yarn tail onto my large-eyed blunt needle. And you want to make sure that the needle has a nice large eye so you can put yarn on it. And you want to make sure it's blunt. You don't want it pointy because we're going between the strands of yarn. We're not piercing them. And if it's too sharp, then it'll kind of pierce the yarn and it makes it a little harder to work with. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to transfer each one of these stitches one at a time onto our blunt needle. Or 2 at a time. You don't have to fuss over this. You don't want to drop any of them. As you're working, you can pull them down onto the yarn. They don't have to stay on the needle. So we're just going to take them a couple at a time. Just make sure if one of them falls off and you don't notice it, what'll happen is this will unravel all the way down. And you probably don't want that. So it's like, I don't know if women still wear nylons, but like when you used to get like a run in your nylons and run down your whole leg. It's kind of the same principle, but I don't know women's fashion, so I don't think they do now. But anyway, just one at a time, being extra careful not to drop them. It does take a minute. I'm trying to hurry, but when you're doing it, be extra careful. And then once you get a bunch on your needle, just pull them down onto the yarn. You don't want to make it uncomfortable in your hand. So notice it doesn't say bind off. We're not binding off. And I don't particularly like to bind off anyway, so I don't mind skipping that. All right. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to pull it and you're going to close up the top of the hat. You're going to pull it until it cinches up tight. And then I'm going to show you how to seam this hat. So you want to pull it very tight. And then you kind of want to go back through that first stitch. Just kind of grab some yarn there and pull it through. Pull it really tight. And then you might want to do that again, just to kind of make sure you don't want it to kind of pull apart. So you might want to go through both sides again and pull it really tight. I'm not going to because I want to be able to undo this hat real easy for the next class. But just make sure you're pulling it really tight because you don't want it to open up again. So pull it tight, maybe go through one more time like this, and then pull it super tight again. But again, I don't want to because I want to make sure I can undo this for the next class. And then now we're going to seam it. And so for seaming, sometimes it's nice to have these clips, or you can use one like this is just for potato chips. And you kind of want to just kind of clip the bottoms together. And you might want to put one part of the way down. Because sometimes when you're sewing knitted fabric, everything's right. It's the same length, but you're sewing, you're having a very nice time. You're doing such a good job. And then you get to the end, it's like, how does that happen? Like, why is that? It wasn't like that when I started, but because it's stretchy, you can easily stretch one out of shape. So it's nice if you can kind of put a clip part of the way and then just kind of stop and double check every now and again to make sure. Okay. So I'm going to show you a stitch now. It's called mattress stitch. And this is one of my favorite stitches. So we want to find your stitch on the very end, your knit stitch. You want to kind of pull it open and separate it from the row next to it. And you're going to pull that bar up that's right in between the stitches. And you're going to go that way. And on the other side, you wouldn't really want to pull it apart this much because it might stretch it out. But for demonstration purposes, I'm doing that for you. So, and it's almost like climbing up the rungs of a ladder. And on this side, go to the next one. So you're always advancing to the next one. And once you get going, you can it's easy to go in a straight line because you can see where you were previous. And then you just want to keep, are you able to see what I'm doing? Claire, are there questions about this? Are people able to see?
Yeah, I think when you hold it up close like that, it's good. I know we're getting a little bit dark here on the East Coast, so.
Yeah. And this yarn's light and it reflects a little bit off of this.
And I know we are over, so I'm just going to pop the handout in the chat in case anybody has to run.
Okay, and this is pretty much the last bit. So once you do that for a couple of inches, then you pull it really tight and you can see it pulls, you can't even see that there's a seam there. So the one thing you want to make sure, you want to do this from the right side. Usually when you're seaming, you want right sides together. In this case, though, you want wrong sides together. So you're working from the right side. And what happens is you end up with this nice seam on the inside, but you can't even see it from the outside. See, there's the seam. And on from the outside, you really can't even tell what happened. It's right there. You really can't even see it. So mattress stitch is one of my favorite stitches. If you don't want to do mattress stitch, then you can just do a running stitch like this, or you can whip stitch it. I mean, there's so many options. The pattern just says seam it, so you can seam it however you want. All of these stitches are equally as good. I just like to show some options. All right. So that's pretty much it. Claire, any final questions? I know you said we're over, so 10 minutes. Oops. Sorry.
We got into a groove there.
Yeah.
I did put the handout in the chat in case anybody needs that before we go. You've got some extra time to practice your knits and your purls and get familiar with them because our next class, Knitting 103, isn't going to be until November 28th. So not next Monday, but the following one. And so that will be learning how to do some shapings. You can do, I think Darren was showing off those mittens earlier. We'll show you how you can make mittens to complete your set of winter accessories.
Now, the thing about these mittens, it looks very intimidating from where you're sitting right now, because look at all this. That looks very hard. But if you think about it, the mitten and the hat are basically the same shape. You've got your ribbing and your stockinette stitch. So what we're learning in class next week is how to make increases to make room for this thumb, and then how to make decreases so that you end up with this nice smooth finish. So don't be intimidated by mittens, because it's not that big of, from here to here is not a big jump. It's just like a nice easy step. So don't be intimidated by it. Make sure you practice. And if you have any questions, you can contact me on Instagram. My Instagram name is Mr. Woolly Bear. Or if you have questions, you can send me a direct message on Facebook, and it's just my regular name, and you'll see my picture. So don't hesitate to ask any questions, so that way you feel like you're able to practice and keep going. All the learning happens when you're practicing. With the yarn and needles in your hands, that's when you do the learning. So, all right, thanks for coming to class. Don't forget to practice. Have a great holiday.